A revealing ode from a father seeking forgiveness from his gay son. A Book of the Month club pick, and named a most anticipated book in Essence magazine, The Millions and Bookish. The author of the critically acclaimed Don't Cry for Me, Daniel Black, joins me. Coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Don't Cry for Me hit the bookshelves this February. It is Dr. Daniel Black's seventh book, and the early reviews are outstanding. Dr. Black, a professor of African American Studies and English at Clark Atlanta University, is the author of 6 other books, including The Coming, Perfect Peace, and They Tell Me of a Home. Good morning and welcome, Dr. Black.
Good morning, Areva. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Wow, so excited to sit down with you. 7 books. So let's start there. You're a professor, a busy professor.
Yes.
How do you have time to write, or how have you had the time to write 7 books?
Well, the truth is that you just find it. This is my 30th year on faculty at Clark Atlanta University. I've been at this Black college for 30 years, and it has been just the most wonderful job a person could ever dream. I've simply had a ball. The most amazing students, the most fantastic faculty to work with. And, the truth is time is tight. And we at Black colleges, we tend to teach more than other colleges. And so I find it 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes while someone else is driving, just find it the best way you can.
Yeah, and I know for you as an English professor in particular, the story is important, but you want the story to be a well-written story because obviously as an English professor, the bar is pretty high. So even though you're stealing 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there, it takes a lot of time.
It does. It takes a remarkable
and to write a well-written novel.
That's right. It takes a lot of time, Areva. And I'm so happy you said that because, yes, I want to tell an amazing story, but it must be well-written. It must be, that's a requirement. And I teach my students, too, that you can ruin a good story with poor grammar.
Hello. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I imagine as being an English professor and being at that university for 30 years, the expectations are incredibly high. So when you send out a manuscript, people are expecting it to be of the highest quality. And all of your books, I've had a chance to look at the reviews. Man, just amazing reviews about your storytelling and your brilliance and your poetry in your writing. So I'm super excited to get to talk about this new book, though. Some describe it as historical fiction, but I was going through coming up with kind of the topics that are touched on in this book. Everything from suicide to cancer, abuse, both physical and emotional abuse, toxic masculinity,
right,
sexual assault, racism, right, slavery, discrimination, right, oppression, LGBTQ issues. This book touches on so many of those issues that we're talking about today. How did you decide to put all of those issues in one book, Professor Black?
Well, to tell you the truth, I wanted to write something that would do some healing work, quite frankly, between Black fathers and their children. And I knew that was a very complicated and is a very complicated topic. But I think it must be done. This is an issue that absolutely has got to be wrestled with. And I think about this, Areva, because, even at the school where I teach, I hear students all the time talk about their precious mothers. And they talk about how, they'll kill you over their mama. Right. But then when we start talking about their fathers, things get very elusive. Things get very strange. They get very estranged. And that sacred bond all of a sudden vanishes away. And as a Black man, that's very disturbing.
I'm so glad you said that because we did a show on Father's Day and we almost didn't do the show because fathers, as you just said, and we are guilty of it at the special report as well, aren't given the same reverence and priority in our society as mothers. And we wouldn't think of not doing a show paying tribute to mothers. And as we were kind of planning the show, we're like, oh my God, it's Father's Day. And, we got to talk about Black fathers in particular, how they are often maligned in the media and all the myths about Black fathers, and to debunk many of those myths. We had one of our favorite guests on. His name is Dr. Dabinga. He is a professor at American University. He's a father, I think, of 3 or 4 kids. And he, too, uses his platform to elevate Black fathers in documentaries and other work. He's a hip-hop artist I'll say that's his side hustle. So he writes a lot about Black fathers. And I'm glad that you decided to do so. But you go further in Don't Cry for Me. It's not just about Black fathers. You also are tackling what is considered in some Black circles a taboo topic, which is having a gay son.
Yes.
Why Black fathers and gay sons?
Because I think there are so many ways that Black fathers over the years have decided that they birthed children they didn't want, especially gay boys. But the truth of the matter is those gay boys were really sent to heal those fathers. Wow. That's what I believe. I fundamentally believe that. And so in many ways, so many Black fathers have thrown away their own salvation. And I want Black fathers to go get those boys. Wow. I want Black fathers to go get those sons. And what I was also trying to do is to shed light on the notion that a son's sexuality is really just about irrelevant when you're talking about a father. Because whoever God sends is for you to love. Whoever God sends is a reflection of you as the father. Right? And I think there are ways that Black fathers have been wonderful and awesome and giving and sacrificial. But I do think there's one thing that in general, it's not every Black father, but in general, too many Black fathers have missed. And that is the vulnerability. That's why kids
expose their
absolutely. That's right. That's why children adore their mothers, because we see our mothers' hearts. We see our mothers' hurts. We see our mothers cry. Our mothers touch us. Right. And very often children are unfamiliar with their father's touch except in reprimand.
Wow. It's so funny, Dr. Black, I'm watching a Netflix series, and there is a line where this Black dad says to his young Black teenage son, and he's been estranged from this son for about 8 years, and now they've reconciled, and the father is dying of cancer. And he says to the son, what I love about you is that you are willing to show your vulnerability. That's something that I was never able to do.
That's right.
And he embraces his son, and he makes his son promise to teach the younger brother, who's like a preteen, to do that as well. So this issue of Black men and vulnerability is obviously something now, even in the what I'll call pop culture, because this is a Netflix, fictional series. Maybe you think is getting more attention now. People are paying attention to this. Is something that we should be talking more about. I think
it is getting more attention, and I think that popular sources are paying it more attention. What I think is not happening is that I don't think we're training boys to do it. I think the media is talking more about it. But when you look at how we rear sons, right? When you look at the ways that we emotionally invest in boys, we're still not teaching boys to be vulnerable, right? We have societal things that teach girls to be vulnerable. Even something as simple as we give girls a doll. Most people don't really realize that a doll is really preparing a girl to take care of someone else. A baby doll is telling a girl that part of your identity, part of your job is the nurturing of another human being.
Little girls, think about those dolls. I mean, we bathe them, we clothe them, we hug
we name them. Absolutely, that's right.
Carry them everywhere we go. We push them in strollers. Yes,
that's right. That's right. But we don't give any boys dolls. Which means
there was that Ken. Remember that there was that Ken.
That Ken, right?
Into Barbie.
That's right. But a boy is not supposed to sleep with him. No. A boy is not supposed to carry him around. No, absolutely not. But here's what's funny. But then we expect those boys to become adults and to nurture babies.
Yeah.
And they've had no experience, no practice doing that at all. Their wives are 10 miles and 20 years ahead of them.
Yeah.
Or even something
about G.I. Joe, Doctor.
The G.I. Joe, that's right. But see, that's a war hero, right? The G.I. Joe is really a war figure. You're not supposed to nurture him.
No.
You're supposed to be like him, right?
He teaches you to fight and to be.
That's right. That's right.
And it's so interesting this because this really plays into the bigger topic in the book. One of the bigger topics of this toxic masculinity.
Right.
And we are seeing that in our political sphere. We're seeing it played out, in how we describe our political figures, who's tough, who's aggressive versus who's weak. And this notion that you are weak if you're not loud, if you're not, just in your face. And those traits of being civil get associated with weakness.
Absolutely. And the truth of the matter is
guns, right? Like to be tough, you got to have a gun.
That's right. That's
not any gun, like a semi-automatic. Yeah. So
the truth of this is that we're in a society that can't quite decide just how much toxic masculinity it wants. See, we want a little bit of it. There are all kinds of ways that we teach boys that we want a little. Things like we want a boy to be able to fight. Every parent wants a son who can fight. In fact, we make him do it. And there are many parents who, if a little boy comes home weeping, saying somebody beat me up, they send him back. But do you know how profound it is to send a son into violence? Yeah. Right? And so,
or they berate them and call them names and really humiliate them publicly because they did not, quote unquote, fight back, stand up, or God forbid they lost the fight, right?
That's right. That's right. Or even
this. With a black eye or
black eye. That's right. Or even we can have, a father might have daughters, right? And he'll kill you over his daughters, right? But we don't teach men and we don't teach boys to honor other people's daughters.
Yeah.
See, if we did that, then we could honor women in general.
Right.
Right.
That's so interesting because we don't teach men to honor women, but then fathers are upset when their daughters date abusive men. It's like, but that abuse was taught to that kid by someone that didn't come out the womb being abusive.
That's right. That's right. As if our daughter is some special kind of girl. Yeah, I think that's
such an interesting conversation. I could talk for you for hours about that. I got to get back into this book. Don't Cry for Me. Again, in this moment, you've written 6 other books. Was there something happening? Was it George Floyd? Was there anything that was happening, in the universe that said now was the time to tackle these very relevant and difficult topics?
Well, the truth of the matter is my own father was dying. Right. But when I first started the book, he wasn't. He contracted Alzheimer's and, it deteriorated and got worse. And the greatest irony is that I finished the book the day he died. Right. And so I knew I needed, to offer this book. But that's not really the reason I wrote it. The real reason I wrote it, again, is because I just continued to see Black boys who emotionally were so fragile that you could almost blow and they'd fall over emotionally. And I began to ask, where in the world do we get such emotional fragility from as men? If it's time to fight, if you want to do sports, we got you. If you want to play a card game, we got you. We can go to the court, we got you. But if you have to look a man in the eye, and in fact, I had a very funny experience, Areva. I was at a store and I turned my head and I saw a brother and I smiled and I spoke to him. I just said, hello. And this is a true story. He said, man, don't be smiling at me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it just really, I didn't say anything else to him. He seemed a little hostile. But what I realized is that masculinity doesn't even have the room for intimacy unless somebody thinking it's about to be sexual. Yeah, all I was doing was saying good afternoon.
Like making a pass at him or something?
And no, I don't think he thought that. What he was saying is, bro, you smile at women.
Okay. You don't smile at a man.
Don't smile at a man.
Maybe you could have nodded.
Exactly. Give him a nod. Exactly. A brother's supposed to say, what's up? What's up?
Yeah.
Right. Which means that there is supposed to be no emotional exchange between men. And I was like, something is crazy about this. right? This is
So
really
that's
crazy.
your aha moment that I got to go and put this pen to paper on this topic?
I don't know if that was just the aha moment. It was certainly one of them. And I was saying there are some, not only are there some problems with masculinity, there are ways in which masculinity has become our emotional incarceration. And we have to revise this idea of what it means to be masculine, this idea of what it means to be a man. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to rear male individuals who are emotionally no good to themselves or women, quite frankly.
Wow. So, Dr. Black, the book is not told in a traditional narrative form.
That's right. That's right.
You use a letter format. You
That's
have
right.
the dad who is dying.
Right.
Cancer, ironically, Isaac, Jacob.
Jacob.
The father, Jacob, is writing to his gay son,
Yes.
Isaac. And it's a series of letters. You never tell us if Isaac gets the letters or if Jacob sends the letters. Why not?
That's right. Well, two things, and I'm going to tell you, so I guess the world will know after this. I'm just finishing up Isaac's response. He does get the letters, and he writes his father back in a series of letters.
Wow. Okay. When does that book come out?
It's probably going to be about a year before that book comes out. But he's writing his father as an ancestor, because by the time he gets the letters, his father has passed, of course.
Okay. So
Now,
these are all the things he never got to say to
that's
his
right,
dad.
to his father. That's right.
Okay, so Jacob, let's talk about this character.
But see, the reason I left this in Jacob's voice is because I wanted Jacob to be center stage, and I wanted Jacob as a black male father to have the opportunity and to take the risk to pour out his heart fully and completely.
Without interruption.
Without interruption, so that nobody could agree or disagree, so that there would be no response, that he just absolutely reveals his heart for the first time in his entire life, right? And I think that absolutely happens in this book. And I think that's important because Isaac has never seen it.
Right. Now,
and I think
you said your dad was dying and he passed, unfortunately. My condolences on the day the book was finished. Were you also estranged from your dad?
No. My father and I have never been estranged, and I grew up with my dad, right? So this book isn't about my dad in that way. No.
Is there any father figure that Jacob resembles that you have met along your your studies at Clark Atlanta? Or
he's similar. He's similar to my father for sure. But the truth of the matter is, Jacob is practically every black man in America who's over 50 or 60 years old. Like every black man I've ever met fits this prototype of Jacob, of being internal in terms of his emotions, right? Of being silent, of not sharing his heart, a man who's no one's ever seen him cry. That's 90% of all the black men I know.
And Jacob grows up himself on a farm in the South.
That's right.
So what he learns about being a man, he learns from this period of being a black man in the South.
That's right.
And all of the racism and oppression that comes along with that. What is it that you want the readers to know about how those experiences shape Jacob's relationship then with his son?
I think that's extremely important. And in fact, what I want readers to know really is that Jacob's idea of manhood, Jacob's idea of masculinity is not his own. Jacob's idea of masculinity belongs to a community. Jacob's idea of masculinity actually belongs to an entire nation. In other words, Jacob perpetuates the notion of manhood that was handed to him by a people. Remember, he said, my grandfather agreed with this. The church agreed. The community agreed. Black women agreed. Black women wanted a man who could work. Black women wanted a man who didn't cry more than them. Black women wanted a man who could, for all practical purposes, protect them. So the idea of masculinity Jacob has, Jacob does not create. It's not his creation. He inherits it. And by inheriting it, he perpetuates it. And part of the reason he perpetuates it is because he's never allowed to go to school. Really, because in school he could have learned
like 8th grade education, right?
And that's barely, because remember, every year 80% of the days he's not there. He's in the field working, right? And this part is true. That part is probably my father. My father got a high school diploma, but Dad used to tell me that he probably had a third grade education at best because he missed at least 70% of the days every year.
I assume your dad maybe had some of the traits of Jacob, but your dad didn't have all of the, what I'm going to call negative traits that we learn about Jacob. Is
Right.
that true?
That's true. That is true.
So how is it that your dad, who grew up in maybe a very similar environment as Jacob, was able to escape taking on some of those traits and characteristics that Jacob and many men of that era did?
I think two things. One of those things is, I think one of the things that was different. I think one of the things that was different for my father, that was different probably for a few other men, right, is that my father did a little traveling, right, and got exposed to some things, right. There's so, and the honest truth is my father was just like Jacob before he left Arkansas, right. That there's so many Black people in rural spaces who live in those spaces the entirety of their living days. Right. And all they know is what they've seen in a 25-mile radius. But the thing that's important, I think, in this case, too, is my father lives a little longer than Jacob. And my father softens a bit also because I, his youngest son, I went and got not only some education, I got as much as one could get. Right. Right. And by doing that, I then was able to bounce ideas off of, and my father and I had great conversations and some intense arguments. Right.
You were able to challenge some of what he had been taught.
For sure. Absolutely.
Phobias, perhaps, that he
absolutely. And there were just absolute priceless things he taught me. Right. And so the truth here is that what I'm really hoping for is that Black men get to the place where we understand between fathers and sons that it's supposed to grow into an exchange, right? A son is not supposed to be a child always, right? But the fragility of rural Black men sometimes means that rural Black men want their sons to always be boys because they always want to have power and authority over them. But that's only because they've never been taught the beauty of what it means to evolve in so many instances, right? And in this book, I think some of what happens is Jacob comes from a grandfather who's even harder than he is. Right? And so this notion of what it means to be rigid that so many people and an entire community celebrates. Jacob then births a son for whom it doesn't work at all. And he's like, what the hell is wrong with this boy? Right. This was the kind of man I had. This was the kind of way we understood manhood. This is the way a boy is supposed to be a boy. You raise a boy is supposed to play sports. He's at least supposed to be physical in some kind of way. And this boy wants to read books and dance. What the hell is this? Right.
Now, Jacob's wife, Isaac's mother, plays a pretty traditional role in the book of being the protector.
Right.
She understands her son in the way that she can.
Right.
And loves and protects him. Why was that important to show the mother, the Black mother, in that protective role?
Because I think in so many instances, number one, Black mothers have been the medium, have been the barrier between really rigid, abusive Black fathers and Black sons, especially Black sons who were artistic or who might have been what we now think of as gay. I think Black mothers literally saved most of those Black boys. Without the mothers, the fathers would have killed them. I absolutely fundamentally believe that. Number one. The second reason this is really important is because of the price she pays to do it. Remember, Rachel, the mother, she wanted to go to college. That's really what she wanted. She wanted to go to school. She wanted education. She wanted to be a poet. But in the 60s, she could not figure out how you do that and have a husband and children. And so she decided to go the traditional route because everybody thought she should, but she regretted it because she gave up her dream to do it, as I think so many, 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 many Black women have done.
Do you think this book is characterized as historical fiction because you do touch on issues of race and racism and slavery? Do you think that's the right way to think about this as a historical fiction book?
I don't think so. It is called historical fiction because I go back in time, right? And I do talk some about racism, slavery, Jim Crow laws, all that's in there. So for that reason, people categorize it as historical fiction, and that's okay. I don't know that I think that's the best term, though. I'm not sure I believe that's the best term. I would call this book spiritual fiction.
Okay.
Right? Because this man who's writing these letters, Jacob, is about to step into the ancestral realm. He's about to step into eternity. And he's writing this book at the precipice, at the doorstep of the everlasting. And by the time his son reads it, he will be in the everlasting, right? And so in many ways, he's writing into the future. So I think it's more spiritual or futuristic Black fiction, I would probably say.
Jacob obviously had some aha moments or some experiences that causes him to say, I need forgiveness, son. I'm sorry. Basically, I mean,
That's right.
This is what these letters are, leading up to is ultimate, this ultimate apology to his
That's
son.
right.
How do men that have lived the life of Jacob, how do they get there? How do they get to that point where they have that, that epiphany?
Yes.
That I don't have to be what my father and my grandfather was. You said your dad had you, super educated. You were able to challenge some of those norms. Everybody's not going to have that. Everybody's not going to have
correct.
a Dr. Black,
No, it's correct.
PhD in
Right.
their lives.
Right.
What
right.
happens to those men that don't?
The truth of the matter, I think, is two things. Number one, most of us are asking too much from our blood. In other words, most of us are asking too much from the people who conceived us. We're living in a society where we think the person who conceived you is supposed to also nurture you. It's supposed to also be the one who takes care of you. It's supposed to also be the one who holds your hand as you walk through life. That is not necessarily true at all. That is not necessarily true at all. Sometimes the person God sends to take you to your different levels of life is not biology. Yeah. It won't be the man who birthed you or that conceived you. It won't be the woman who necessarily birthed you. And a lot of times we'll miss those people, Areva, because we're still waiting and wanting it to be the person who birthed me. And it's like, that's the only person who I really will be satisfied with in terms of who loves me and who nurtures me. But that is an error. Somebody's job is to get you here. Somebody else's job is to take you the distance sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that can be a hard pill to swallow because we're taught that your parents are supposed to be your all in all. But it's not true.
Yeah, this is a deep concept because you're right. I'm thinking, the implicit contract, right, is if you birth me, you are, and of course the law, legally, you are responsible for that person until they reach the age of 18. Financially, you're responsible for them. You got to pay child support. If the child is truant, you're responsible. You could be held liable in court if the child does something. So our society sets up this expectation.
It's true
that the parent is responsible in pretty much every aspect. And I'm thinking about this case now we're watching in Oxford, Michigan, where these two parents have been charged with involuntary manslaughter because their son, 15-year-old, goes to a school, shoots up the school, kills 4 students and shoots 7 other people. And the law is saying, parents, you are responsible because you didn't protect this gun,
right.
You didn't put it in a safe place.
Right.
You ignored red flags that your son was suffering from some mental health issues and crying out for help. So society, in every way I can think of, and I'm thinking legally as a lawyer, says to parents, you are responsible. So
That's
how
right.
do we?
But the truth of the matter,
the way
Areva,
that you just described,
right, Areva, what you and I know as Black people is there are very few Black people. If we think about it, right, this is an important concept. There are very few Black kids who grew up with the same mother and biological father who conceived them, and all of their siblings are by those same 2 people. There are very, very few Black people.
Air the dirty laundry, Dr. Black.
Very few Black people have that reality. Very few Black kids have that reality. The other thing is, that's not even our history. If you take Black folks in terms of the history we have in this country, if we go back from slavery forward, very few kids were raised by their own biological parents. Slavery totally disrupted that for us as a people. Right? That was almost never true. And when I think about my life, and probably it's true when you think about yours, it is not true that the only truly influential people in my life were the biological mother and father who conceived me. That's not true at all.
No, it's definitely not true in my life. I didn't meet my biological father until I was 18 years old. So,
I didn't meet my biological mother until I was 17. So you see?
yeah, no, that is definitely the story of so many African American families, particularly those of us who are over the age of some age,
Right.
who've been here for a little bit, right? That is our story. Those stats may be changing, though. Do you think that changing, or black? You know, and I hate to use words like intact because they
Right.
cast judgment on other families, and we know families come in all shapes and forms.
Right.
Has it changed in terms? I'm just going to say biological parents, mother and father, are in the house with kids.
I don't think so. Again, I've been at a black college for 30 years, and it is certainly not any more true now. I think it's less true now than it was when I started teaching there. And I use that population because I get black kids from all over America. Right. It is not true that more of them now are coming who were reared by their biological mother and father, and all their siblings were too. No, I do not see that. And you're right. That doesn't mean the family's not wonderful and beautiful and wonderful. It doesn't mean that. What it does mean is our expectation of blood. See, a man told me something years ago that really helped me. You know, we use this phrase that blood is thicker than water. Mm-hmm. True. But spirit can be thicker than blood. Mm-hmm. When someone chooses you, when someone sees the light in your eyes, when someone sees the value of who you are, when someone sees and knows and understands your destiny and volunteers to take you or help move you in that direction, that's priceless. It's absolutely positively priceless.
And so we got here because I was asking you, what about those people, those men who maybe don't have someone like you in their lives to help them have that enlightened moment? What happens to them? So
many of them, I think many end up drinking. I think many end up smoking weed. I think many end up in jail. I'm one who believes, Areva, that 90% of the young black men in jail, we could love them out of it. The real issue, I know what the issue is on the table. I know what it looks like. I got it. The real deep-rooted issue is that no one ever looked at them and said, I see the halo above your head, brother. Mm-hmm. I know the angel you are. That's what they've missed.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to this Netflix series I'm watching because it encompasses all of these things. And there's a line, again, in this Netflix series, so well written, I need to figure out who wrote it. But there's a young straight A student who's the star football player. And there's a kid who's been incarcerated, who's come back to the school, and he's always getting his locker searched. And, he's the target because he's been to jail. And the school board is saying, we're going to save the kid, the straight A school, the straight A athlete, and the others, like the kid who's been to jail, we're going to cast you aside. And the straight A student says, no, my life is no more valuable than the kid that made one mistake. Wow. And you adults, your job is to protect all of us. And had somebody been in that kid's life the way my mom was for me, he would be here too. Because I'm no different than him and he's no different than me. And so you're saying the same thing, that those men in our community that oftentimes end up either, substance abuse, addicted, incarcerated, etc.
Right.
They didn't have somebody that saw them, recognized that it wasn't you or me. We, it's nothing so special about us. Anybody can learn if they're put in the right environment and can get a PhD or a law degree. Right. And so it just matters.
It matters. In fact, it's everything.
Encounters with.
It's like, I would often use a metaphor, Areva. It's like planting a seed, but never watering it. Mm-hmm. Never nurturing, never fertilizing it. But then expecting it to bloom and to give the sweetest fruit. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Do you think, and you can't give us too much because you can't give away Isaac's response to Jacob that's coming out in the new book.
I can't give that away.
Can't give that away, but in your experience, fathers who have been like Jacob, who have cast their gay kids aside. I'm thinking about my own son. I don't have a gay son. I have a son that has autism. And a lot of fathers cast their kids with autism aside because that kid doesn't fit their, their traditional idea of what a son should be that can
Right.
throw football or play sports, as you said. So we see this with kids who are different in a lot of ways, not just kids who are gay.
Right.
Can a child ever forgive a father that has done that?
In fact, Areva, a child is waiting to forgive a father. Every child I have ever met, their fury about their father is not the father's weaknesses. It's the fact that the father won't say, I'm sorry.
Mm.
A child will forgive the second a father or a mother simply admits that I messed up.
It's so interesting that you say that, because when I did meet my father, I was determined to get him to say that.
That's
and
right.
he was as determined in the early days of our relationship
Not to say
it. And being the aggressive, argumentative, way pre-law school, but spirit that I had, I was on a mission to get him to say that. Why is it so hard for a Black man that has been estranged from their child? Why is it so hard to just say I'm sorry?
Because what most of us believe is if I say I'm sorry, I lose my authority as a daddy. And it's not true.
But if you haven't been there as a dad, acting in that capacity, serving in that capacity, standing in that space as a dad, do you really have rights to lay claim to that authority?
Yes, because most Black men, in their absence, they're still dreaming their authority. In their heads, they have dreamed in fact, most Black men, as you said with you, most Black men will argue with their children, right, that even in my absence, right, I was still loving you. I was still praying for you. I was still thinking about you. And of course, the child is like, what? But I never saw you.
And also something my father said, there was this dynamic of, as you just said, even though I may have been wrong, I am still the father. And you, child, don't get to challenge me. And I remember my father, he's deceased now, but he would talk about his generation. Like, he would tell me, your generation wants to talk too much. We didn't talk like that in my generation. Like, we didn't have to answer to our kids. So that was really hard for him, because his father, who was an alcoholic, who, wasn't around, he didn't have any expectation that his dad owed him
That's right.
An explanation for his.
That's right.
He just had to accept it as
That's
that
right.
was his reality.
That's right. That's
so
right.
when I challenged him about, I need to know the story. Like, dude, what happened? Where were you?
And see, even that, Areva, is really a historically new thing. This notion of challenging a Black parent, like, tell me what happened, where you been, that is a historically new thing.
Yeah.
That's post 1970s.
We didn't go to therapy, but we finally got there where he told me, though, I guess I just, browbeat him and harassed him to the point where he's like, damn, girl, okay, here's the story.
Right.
He just told
and I'm
me
glad you did.
But a lot of dads, his idea was like, I don't owe you that. Like,
that's right.
And in my mind, I was like, you owe me that and more.
And more, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, okay. You and I'm in therapy now with you, okay.
But see, the other thing that I do want to say about this is, remember, up to a point, what the Black community did generally was, you don't question your parents. What you do is just be silent and go on, and God is going to take care of your needs. Whatever you need, God's going to handle it, right? Get over it, move past it. Look at how blessed you are anyway. There are all kinds of ways the Black community justified, right, parents being silent.
Yeah,
and it was incredibly destructive.
My husband grew up in a home with his mother and father intact, although the mother had two children that were not, to your point. His siblings all were there with his mom and dad, but the mom had two kids that weren't by his dad.
Right.
So he asked me often, what did my mother and grandmother, who I grew up with, godmother, say about my father? And I don't think he's incredulous when I tell him they didn't say nothing, or they said you don't need that. And I won't say what they said.
Right.
Imagine what they said, because Black women had figured out a way to just do the job of mother and father, and we weren't like sitting around having pity parties and crying about it and lamenting
That's
the
right.
absence.
That's right.
It's like, I remember my godmother would say to me, what do you need them for? Like, what do you need? Tell me. I got it. Tell me what you know. So in her mind, because she wasn't thinking like, because they weren't dealing with the deep rooted emotions of abandonment and all those issues. She's like, what, you need some lunch money? You need what do you need?
That's right.
I got it.
That's right. And they didn't think of men as necessary to the heart.
Nah, no. They were providers. And if they had the providing part taken care of, everything was good.
Everything was good. That's right. That's right.
What's your problem?
What's your problem? That's right.
And do this because we just walked through this. Wow, this is a interesting conversation. Now I got to get back to this book because this book embodies all of these themes. And everybody, if you have not read any of Dr. Black's books, start with this one. There's 7, but work your way back because this one is so riveting. And right now, I mean, before I have you read a passage, we couldn't let this day go by without acknowledging that this is the day that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she just got sworn in, first African-American woman on the Supreme Court in the 230 plus years of our court. And I know in your book, you touch on issues of race. What would Jacob be thinking if he had lived to see this moment where this Black woman, and we know what Jacob's relationship was with Rachel in the book is this a very kind of tortured relationship in many ways. But to have a Black woman ascend to this high court, particularly in this era where we are so divided as a nation and issues of race are so difficult for us as a nation to confront and to deal with. What are you thinking in this moment about Ketanji Brown Jackson?
Well, of course, I'm extremely proud of her. I think it's such a wonderful thing. And I have to be honest. I'm glad not only that she's a Black woman, I'm glad she's a dark-skinned Black woman. Yeah. Right. I think that's just fantastic and wonderful. And I think she'll be an amazing addition. Now, do I think Jacob would celebrate? I'm not so sure because Jacob has patriarchal ways, right, that limit his ability to see the beauty and the boundless possibility of women in all kinds of places of authority. I'm not sure Jacob would be tremendously happy. I think Jacob might be a little skeptical about this, like how this woman is going to sit up on this, court. And I think Jacob's question would be like, she's not going to undermine these men, is she? And so I think Jacob would have some hesitation about it.
In his patriarchy, for sure. I mean, it is well entrenched. You actually do the audio version of this book. So anyone that wants to listen to this book while you're driving or while you're exercising, Dr. Black is not just an amazing storyteller and writer, but his performance of his text is so incredible, so much so, which is how I really discovered you reading this other passage that we found on YouTube. You're going to read a passage now from Don't Cry for Me. And this is the author's note. And I'm so excited. And again, this is going to get everyone super excited to go out and buy this book, either the audio version or the paperback version of it. So take it away, Dr. Black.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Areva. When in 2013, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I knew what it meant. He'd soon forget what he'd done or said to me over the years. In fact, he'd need my sympathy, perhaps my financial assistance, as his memory faded away. For a while, I had wanted us to hash things out, to speak honestly about how we had hurt or disappointed one another over the years. But Daddy's mind left like a dream at dawn. And now the encounter could happen only in my imagination. So that's where I went. I saw in my mind my father leaning over a legal pad, writing as best he could, something very private, very painful that couldn't wait another day. I imagined him ancestral, though still in the flesh, such that he knew and understood everything about me. And I imagined him unashamed. I wondered what he'd say if he could stare into my heart. This book is his desperate plea. My father grew up in a time when Black children meant nothing to America. Most of them didn't have a birth certificate. Their care, their education was optional. Whether they lived or died was insignificant to the state. For the most part, their existence centered around work and church. And even the church taught them that they were sinners undone, black children of Ham, who without a forgiving God had little hope for a life in the next life. Children in my father's generation were taught that dreams were a waste of time. Schooling happened only when there was no labor to be done, and that wasn't very often. Well, my father needed a birth certificate in his latter years in order to draw Social Security. The state told him, get a birth certificate form and make it up. If you don't know your birthday, hell, pick a day. I was horrified at the arbitrary nature of his life. Only then did I understand his harsh, insensitive demeanor. In some ways, Daddy envied the life he had provided for me. He too had wanted knowledge, travel, enlightenment, but such was laughable for a black boy in the 1940s. Yet my freedom angered him. It made me question his world, his convictions, his God. After all, I had gone to school, and now I did not have to take what he thought as what I thought. Actually, I wanted nothing to do with his manhood. He wanted nothing to do with my fluidity. We were never united in our hearts again. Yet once Alzheimer's took Daddy's mind, I discovered a man who was more than a field plow. He wanted what I wanted, to mean something to the world, to make a difference in somebody's life, to be admired for the man he was. But we never achieved that mutual clarity. So this book, this record of a poor black father's appeal, is what any dying daddy might say to his son. Many of them were handed so little, yet we expected so much. They were given more than they had, but we expected so much more than they had the capacity to provide. But if they'd been allowed to dream, they might have expected sons who were more than mere carbon copies of themselves. They might have imagined boys in all their glory dancing before the world without shame. They might have granted even a queer son permission to be himself and applauded as they watched. They might have known that some spirits come to the world to disrupt normalcy and thereby to create space for the despised and the rejected. And they might have even understood that any son is a father's eternal blessing if they'd been allowed to dream.
Wow, that is so powerful, Dr. Black. This is a book that anyone that has a father, which that's all of us,
right,
should definitely pick up, whether you have an estranged relationship with your dad or whether you have a close relationship with your dad.
Yes.
Such powerful words. I'm so glad that you gave us a glimpse of your relationship with your own dad and
Yes.
are giving us an opportunity to understand better. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is understanding how little some of our dads had.
That's right.
To give, and not judging them by the standards of folk today who have been given so much more, but recognizing where they were in the history of this country.
And sometimes, Areva, too, this is important because many of us don't care for this, what I'm about to say. But the fact that we have opportunities that they never even dreamed of really means that we owe our fathers forgiveness. Because some of them, what they gave us was in the blood. See, there are things we inherited from some of our fathers that we have no idea about. Some of us inherited intellectual acumen, but we inherited it in the blood. Some of us inherited a sharp mind. Some of us inherited the ability to sing. See, some things our parents give us are not tangible things. They're actually in the bloodline. And for many of us, that's all we needed from them.
Yeah.
And we got it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at us.
We got it. Yeah.
We got it.
We got it. We got it. Thank you so much, Dr. White. What a joy it's been to sit down with you. I've got to go now and get those other books that you've written. You've just piqued my interest and curiosity in how you think and how you write is so powerful. I want
Thank
everyone to go
you.
out and get a copy of Don't Cry for Me and pick up the other books that Dr. Black has written. Follow him on social.
Yes.
Look for this new book.
Yes.
Come out next year. I'm definitely going to have you back so we can
Yes,
see
ma'am.
what Mr. Isaac
Yes.
say to Mr. Jacob.
Yes. Yes.
Can't wait. Last question. Any plans in the works to translate this powerful piece of work into a movie project, a TV project, some kind of visual?
Yes. I think this would make an awesome movie. I think it would just make an awesome, awesome, awesome movie, I must say. So I'm glad you asked that. And already I've had one offer. It wasn't the best offer, so I'm kind of holding out. But I absolutely would love that. I have a book titled Perfect Peace that is under serious negotiation right now. So I think it's going to make it. And then I think this will be the second project. So I'm absolutely hoping that these go to screen, because I feel like that visual media would just really take these books to a whole nother level.
Oh, yeah. Get to see those characters come alive.
Yes.
Okay. In your, your biggest dream, who plays Isaac and who plays Jacob?
Ooh, I don't know. And I've thought about that. I don't know. I feel like there's so
Samuel
many.
Jackson maybe could be Jacob.
Could be. I think there's
Morgan
some power.
Freeman could be Jacob.
Morgan Freeman could be Jacob. They could be. They absolutely. I think there's so many powerful young brothers out in Hollywood doing amazing things now. So I think there are just so many choices. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you better start thinking about that, because something tells me once that first project goes, the second one's going to be close behind it. So,
I hope so.
Start thinking about those big names and some maybe unknown actors who bring these characters to life, because whoever has the privilege of doing that, translating these actors, they have such rich material to work with.
Yes,
Again,
ma'am.
thank you so much, Dr. Black, for sitting down with me, and best of luck. Keep us posted on those visual projects.
I will do.
Books, and we look forward to hearing, like I said, Mr. Isaac's response to his dad.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Areva, and it's just been a joy and a pleasure.
Right. All right. Again, make sure you go out and pick up a copy of this book, Don't Cry for Me. Get the hard copy or get it on audio. Dr. Black does such a phenomenal job. His voice, the way he reads, the way he projects will keep you so into the book. And even if you pick up the traditional version, it's definitely a page turner. Some of the reviews have called it both powerful and painful. And I don't know about you, but I love a good book that'll have me both laughing and crying at the same time. And I think this book does both of those. Just some words to live by before I get out. And this is a quote from the book. A man's history is all he has. It says more than his mouth ever will. Let my words love you better than I ever did. Be safe out there, and remember, we're all in this together.